Welcome to episode 103 of the BCF ORG podcast, The Business of Business. I'm Brian Fisher. In the previous episode, 102, our guest was Michael Fortenary, discussing hourly wage compensation. This podcast series is targeted to business owners and C-suite executives. It reflects my 34 years as a business owner and subsequent years as a business mentor and consultant. It focuses on the various subjects and topics to help you run a successful, profitable business. They're approximately 15 minutes long, so you can listen while commuting. And hopefully, you'll find one or two takeaways to implement per episode. Today's episode discusses selling your business with Lien De Pau. Based out of Panama, Lien De Pau is the founder and head of methodology development of The Big Exit and a contributing writer about small business strategy for Forbes. Most small business owners never think of selling their business, and when they do, it's often too late. But here you are. Lien is a multifaceted serial entrepreneur with an obsession for freedompreneurship. Her expertise in launching, scaling, and exiting various service-based businesses positions her uniquely in the entrepreneur landscape. Lien and her team work with business owners mostly selling businesses. They typically work with the big exit 3 to 5 years prior to their exit, gaining the knowledge, network, support, and the expertise they need for a life-changing exit. Beyond her business pursuits, she is also an accredited angel investor, especially in sectors like EdTech and FemTech, and known as a best-selling author of Get Real, a practical guide on how to live it up. Let's welcome Lien De Pau. Lien, welcome to the BCF ORG podcast, The Business of Business.
Hey, Brian, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about the conversation we're going to have.
Oh, Lien, thank you so much for joining us today. Lien, I'm always interested in people's stories. What's your background in becoming the founder and head of methodology development of The Big Exit?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love a good founder story as well. Brian, I've been a serial entrepreneur for about 15 years now, which basically means I have had multiple companies before the big exit. I love the thrill of building a business, spotting an opportunity in the market, starting a business, growing a business, selling a business, eventually letting it go into its next chapter. That's really what I love. And professionally, I come from a background of professional education. I have been doing that in big corporates in logistics and pharma. And then when I moved into entrepreneurship, one of my key things that I always find really important and that I have kind of created my professional mission around is to make sure that we as small business owners, if I can say that, we are knowledgeable and educated on the topics that are important to us personally, for our personal growth, and to our businesses that we are building in the world.
Well, that fits right into today's episode about selling your business. And that topic is near and dear to my heart. I sold my business just over 5 years ago, and I'd never sold a business before, and I was acquisition 44 for the company that bought mine. Which brings me to this question. When should business owners start thinking about selling their business?
I love this question, Brian. And congratulations, first of all, on your exit. This is an exciting part of entrepreneurship, right? And I'm really excited to be talking about exiting as well, because for a lot of business owners, it's never really on the table and they never really have selling or exiting conversations. And that leads me back to your question about when is the good time to start thinking about selling. And I always say this, like, the best time to start thinking of selling your business is the moment when you start your business. And the second best time is probably today, whilst you're listening to this podcast.
Well, Lien, how do business owners know if their business is sellable? And how should they prepare to sell their business?
That's a great question. Like, Basically, every small business owner that I work with or that I happen to meet, they ask me this question, like, how do I know if my business is sellable, and how do I know if my business is valuable? And the good thing about this is it's a question or two questions that are relatively easy to answer. Like, if as a business owner, if you would like to know how much your business is worth, you could get it valued, ideally by an independent expert, or you could use one of these like free valuation tools that you can find online. I would always recommend to maybe use a couple of those free ones if that's what you like, so you can kind of compare the results from that. So that's that part. And when I talk about valuation with small business owners, when they first, get their first business valuation done, which is often already after maybe a decade or 2 decades in business, right? It's like then that's the first time that they actually get a valuation done for the business. For most small business owners, it's very disappointing. You have put your heart and blood and sweat and tears, hopefully not blood, but definitely sweat and tears for sure. Like, I've been an entrepreneur myself for a long time, so I know that that is true. Like, you've poured so much into your life's work, and it is so valuable to you that often it is a little bit heartbreaking to hear maybe what somebody else thinks of the value of your business. So, for all those business owners listening that have never done a valuation before, I just want to give them a heads up that it might be a little bit lower than what you were expecting. Now, you can bounce back from that. You might need a little bit of time to digest that message, but just so you know, there are a couple of things that you could do as a small business owner that don't necessarily take a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money to make your business more valuable slash more sellable, right? So that gets me back to the second part of your question, like what makes a business sellable? And I always say, Brian, any business can be sold. That's the good news. The question is for how much and by when do you want to get it sold? So that's that part. But when we do assessments on small businesses to understand their sellability, like we have a thing that we call the big exit score, and it's basically a score out of 100 that gives you an indication on the sellability of your business. So when we do these sellability assessments with small business owners, what we tend to see is the same kind of things that are coming back that either drive value in the business or kind of reduce the value of a business. Now, I'll tell you what a very sellable business is. It's the business where you, as the owner, are not very actively taking part into the day to day. Professionals might call this owner independence. So basically, the business can run independently from you as the owner. Why is that a very sellable business? Well, when somebody buys that business, they don't need you as the owner to run it because you have not been running this business before either. So that makes a business really sellable. It's what we call owner independence. And for smaller businesses, particularly, when I'm talking about smaller businesses, I mean like businesses less than 2 million in annual revenue. One of the other things that makes them really sellable is high profitability. And the reason for that is because most of the buyers of these kinds of businesses will want to pay back the money that they spent on buying your business by the profits that the business is generating. So it's slightly different than, sometimes you hear about these crazy selling or buying prices for companies that are often in the tech space. They're like SaaS businesses like that, who often sell for incredible amounts of money whilst they actually have no profit whatsoever, or they've been in the red for 5 years or 10 years or for as long as they have existed. Now, for small businesses, that doesn't work like that. You really need profitability because that's going to be the key driver for the sellability of your business. So that's a very long answer to a very short question, Brian. But I hope that explains a little bit what makes a business valuable and what makes a business sellable.
Well, one of your points in there, Lynn, is letting go. When you start a business and you grow a business, it becomes your life. And it's very, very hard to separate yourself from that.
100%. I think I just wrote a article for Forbes on this very specific topic. It's, there's the nuts and the bolts of what makes a business sellable and valuable. But then there's the emotional journey that you go through as an owner. And the more you have been, like growing this baby, you grow this baby and it becomes like a toddler and it becomes a small child and it becomes a teenager. And, like you go through all these life stages of this business. You often are so emotionally involved, both with your team, with your clients, with the business in and of itself. And letting go of that and letting go of that identity, letting go of the feeling of being needed, the feeling of making a difference, the feeling of making an impact, the feeling of being important. All these things come with having our own business. And when you sell, a lot of that purpose, a lot of that satisfaction, all these good things that we love in our life disappears. And a lot of small business owners struggle with depression in the first couple of months, if not years, after selling a business. It shouldn't be a reason why you shouldn't sell, but it's good to be aware of that and to figure out how your new life and your new chapter is going to look like. Maybe you're going to create an amazing podcast like you are doing, Brian, with this podcast, right? Like that's a new venture you dive into. I don't know if you started this for that particular reason, but it could be very meaningful and very powerful.
Actually, I started this podcast to help people run a successful, profitable business, which ends up coming towards the topic that we're talking about now, about exiting and selling your business. And you mentioned about the nuts and bolts. So often the nuts and bolts are what we talk about all the time. The emotional side rarely, if ever, gets addressed. And for me, I call it took me just over about a year or so to come up with what I call Brian 2.0 for all the things that you mentioned.
Makes absolute sense. There's a couple of things that I'm happy to share, just like three things that we always mention to owners who have sold their business. It's like, first of all, take your time. Don't dive into the next opportunity, the next masterpiece, the next idea. Don't try to soothe your unease with something new that is going to be a roller coaster taking you on to the next thing. So relax, celebrate. Don't forget to celebrate. It's incredible how many owners sell, and it's a very long process and it's enduring and it takes a very long time and it's draining. It's remarkable how many owners forget to actually celebrate this massive milestone in their life. So relax, celebrate, and if you can, journal or write some stuff down. Try to kind of get comfortable with this new phase of your life where you're not being needed every day, where you're not being in demand every day, where you're not feeling the adrenaline every day. So take time to journal, to reflect on what has happened and what is currently happening for you. And do that for 6 months or 12 months, like you are doing as well, Brian, just taking your time to kind of figure out the new version of you.
We're speaking with Lien De Pau, founder and head of methodology development of The Big Exit. Lynn, how can people get in contact with you?
They can do that through LinkedIn. Lien De Pau on LinkedIn. I am the only person with that name, so that shouldn't be too difficult. So LinkedIn is a good place. And our website, of course, thebigexit.co. We have free valuations for those who are interested in getting like a range of value for the business that they have, like that first idea of what their business is worth. We also have a free sellability assessment on that website as well. So if you're wondering not just how much your business is worth, but if it's actually sellable, that's a really great assessment to take as well. And we have a lot of resources there in terms of blogs. We have about 50 blog posts, I think, on that website as well. It's got everything to do with preparing your business for sale.
Those are really a couple very, very nice tools.
We really try to answer these questions that small business owners have around how sellable is my business, how valuable is my business, when should I start thinking about selling, what's a good time to sell, how do I go about doing that, like all these basic questions that you should get a little bit clear on before actually getting into the sales process of your business. That's what we're aiming to cover with our blog on the Big Exit.
Lien, thank you very much for joining us today on the BCF ORG podcast, The Business of Business.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
My sincere thanks to Lien De Pau for joining us today. Managing the performance of your company is one of the most important things you do as a leader. This podcast is on YouTube and over 20 podcast directories. In search, type BCF ORG. Be sure to leave a space between BCF and ORG. Don't forget to like, subscribe, or follow the podcast. If you'd like to reach out to me for business mentoring or consulting, schedule a speaking engagement, ask questions, make comments, suggest ideas, or potentially be a guest like Lien, please go to bcforg.com. There's a red Contact Us button in the middle of the homepage. A LinkedIn symbol's on the upper right. Click on that if you'd like to see my profile. All the podcasts are available by clicking on the website podcast page in the reference bar. These podcasts will be released the first and third Tuesday each month. In the next episode, 104, our guest will be Jose Berlanga, discussing entrepreneurship. In business, running a successful, profitable business is the ultimate scorecard. You are never done and can always be better. It tends to be more fun than work, frustrating at times, but can be very rewarding. And don't underestimate the value of a business plan and financial planning. From BCF ORG Corp., I'm Brian Fisher, wishing you the best. Thanks.